Imagine holding a weapon so revolutionary that soldiers would disobey direct orders from Hitler himself just to keep using it. A weapon so revolutionary that it would reshape warfare for the next 80 years. Now imagine that the very reason soldiers loved this weapon reveals something deeply unsettling about combat and human psychology. This is the story of the STG-44, and why German soldiers became so attached to it that they disobeyed direct orders, risked court-martial, and fought harder than ever before just to keep it in their hands. Let's go back to 1942. The Eastern Front. German soldiers are locked in the most brutal combat the world has ever seen. Temperatures drop to -40 degrees. Soviet forces attack in overwhelming numbers. And German troops are facing a problem that's getting them killed by the thousands. Here's the situation. A German soldier carries two types of weapons. He has the Kar-98K rifle, a bolt-action weapon that fires powerful bullets accurately up to 800 meters. Beautiful engineering. Deadly precision. But there's a massive problem. In real combat, this soldier almost never shoots at enemies 800 meters away. Most firefights happen between 100 and 300 meters. Sometimes closer. And at these distances, that bolt-action rifle is getting him killed. Why? Because he can only fire 5 shots before reloading. After each shot, he has to pull back the bolt, eject the empty shell, chamber a new round, and aim again. In combat, this takes precious seconds. When Soviet soldiers charge across an open field, those seconds mean everything. 5 shots. 5 dead enemies if he's lucky and skilled. But what about the 20 others still charging? His other option is the MP-40 submachine gun. This weapon sprays bullets fast. 32 rounds in the magazine. Perfect for close combat in buildings and trenches. But here's the catch. It fires pistol ammunition. Beyond 100 meters, those bullets lose power and accuracy fast. The weapon becomes almost useless at distances where most combat actually happens. So picture this scenario that happened thousands of times across the Eastern Front. Soviet infantry emerge from a tree line 200 meters away. They're charging. Your rifle is too slow. Your submachine gun can't reach them yet. You're trapped in a killing zone where neither weapon works well. This exact situation was killing German soldiers every single day. But then something changed. Soldiers started receiving a new weapon. No fanfare. No official announcement. Just quiet distribution to select units for testing. The weapon looked different. It had a curved magazine holding 30 rounds. A pistol grip. A selector switch that let you choose between single shots and automatic fire. It was called the Maschinen Karabiner 42, or MKB-42. The first soldier to receive one probably didn't realize he was holding the future of warfare. He probably just thought, finally, something that might keep me alive. Then combat happened. And everything changed. Imagine being that soldier. Soviet troops appear at 250 meters. You raise this new weapon. Set the selector to semi-automatic. Fire. The recoil is manageable, much less than your old rifle. The bullet hits the target. Fire again. Another hit. The weapon feels controllable, natural. Now the enemy is closer. You flip the selector to full automatic. Squeeze the trigger. The weapon fires rapidly but stays on target. You can see your bullets impacting. Adjust your aim. Keep firing. The advancing soldiers fall. For the first time, you're not choosing between long-range accuracy and close-range firepower. You have both. In one weapon. And the feeling of power is intoxicating. Word spread like wildfire through German units. Soldiers who received the weapon wrote letters home describing it in almost mythical terms. The wonder weapon has arrived, one soldier wrote to his brother. I feel like I could take on an entire company by myself. Another wrote, finally, someone designed a weapon for actual combat, not parade grounds. But here's where the story takes a strange turn. Adolf Hitler hated the weapon. Yes, the same man who obsessed over tanks, rockets, and every possible wonder weapon that might turn the tide of war actually ordered the MKB-42's development stopped. He called it a waste of ammunition. He believed soldiers needed rifles for long-range precision, not spray-and-pray weapons that wasted bullets. His generals faced a dilemma. They had combat reports proving the weapon worked. Soldiers loved it. Units equipped with it performed dramatically better. But the Führer had given a direct order. What would you do in their position? They decided to continue development in secret. They renamed the weapon. Called it the MP-43, making it sound like a submachine gun instead of a rifle. They produced it in limited quantities and sent it to the front for extended testing. Thousands of weapons. Tens of thousands. All officially categorized as something else to avoid Hitler's attention. Why were they willing to risk so much? Because the reports from the front were impossible to ignore. Soldiers equipped with the weapon were surviving at higher rates. They were winning engagements they should have lost. Small German units were holding off larger Soviet forces. The weapon wasn't just good, it was changing the fundamental mathematics of infantry combat. Here's something fascinating about how soldiers reacted to the weapon. Units that received it saw their combat effectiveness increase, obviously. But something else happened too. Soldier morale jumped dramatically. Confidence increased. Men who had been cautious, even frightened, suddenly fought more aggressively. They took positions they would have avoided before. They held ground they would have retreated from. The weapon didn't just change what soldiers could do. It changed how they felt about combat itself. Let's talk about what made this weapon so special. The secret was something called an intermediate cartridge. Traditional rifle bullets were massive, designed to kill at extreme distances. They produced tremendous recoil and required heavy ammunition. Submachine gun bullets were tiny pistol rounds, easy to control but weak at distance. The STG-44's bullet, the 7.92 by 33 mm Kurs, split the difference. Smaller than a rifle round, bigger than a pistol round. This intermediate size created a perfect balance. The bullet had enough power to kill effectively at 400 meters. But it produced low enough recoil that a soldier could fire the weapon on full automatic and actually keep it on target. Think about what this means. For the first time in history, a single soldier could deliver sustained, accurate automatic fire at combat distances. Not just spray bullets randomly and hope. Actually hit what he was aiming at while firing multiple rounds per second. The psychological impact was enormous. Previous automatic weapons made soldiers feel out of control. Pull the trigger and the weapon climbed, bullets scattered. You were fighting the gun as much as the enemy. But the STG-44 felt controllable. Responsive. Like the weapon was working with you, not against you. Soldiers described a feeling of completeness when carrying it. One veteran later recalled, "For the first time I felt like I had the right tool for the job. Not too much weapon for close range, not too little for distance. Just right for actual war." But there's something darker underneath these testimonials. Why did soldiers feel so empowered by this weapon? What was really happening psychologically? Here's the uncomfortable truth that military researchers discovered after the war. Many soldiers in combat never fire their weapons. Even when being shot at. Even when their survival depends on it. Studies showed that in World War II, only about 15 to 20% of American soldiers actually fired at the enemy during combat. The psychological resistance to killing another human being is stronger than the instinct for self-preservation. The STG-44 changed this equation in subtle but significant ways. The intermediate cartridge and reduced recoil made the weapon feel less violent to shoot. The crack of the shot was sharper, less thunderous than a full-power rifle. The recoil was firm but not punishing. Psychologically, it felt less serious even though it was just as deadly. More importantly, the ability to fire automatically created psychological distance from each individual killing. With a bolt-action rifle, every shot is a distinct decision. Pull the trigger. Work the bolt. Aim again. Pull the trigger again. Each death is separate, conscious, intentional. But with automatic fire, a soldier could squeeze the trigger and fire 10, 15, 20 rounds in seconds. Individual kills blurred together. The psychological weight of each death was diluted through volume. Does this sound manipulative? It should. Because that's exactly what effective weapon design does. It manipulates human psychology to overcome natural resistance to violence. German soldiers loved the STG-44 because it made them more effective killers. But the reason it made them more effective wasn't just mechanical superiority. It was psychological engineering. The weapon reduced the mental barriers that normally prevented soldiers from firing. It made killing feel more natural, more automatic, less weighty. By 1943, the weapon's existence couldn't be hidden anymore. Too many were in circulation. Soldiers were writing home about it. Captured examples were showing up in Soviet hands. Hitler finally learned that his generals had defied his direct order. What happened next surprised everyone. Instead of punishment, Hitler examined the combat reports himself. He saw the numbers. Units with the new weapon performed dramatically better. Soldier survival rates increased. Small groups could hold off larger forces. The evidence was overwhelming. In April 1944, Hitler not only approved the weapon but ordered mass production. He personally gave it a new name, Sturmgewehr 44. The assault rifle. That term, assault rifle, would define an entire category of weapons that now dominates military arsenals worldwide. But by 1944 Germany's industrial capacity was crumbling. Allied bombing had destroyed factories. Raw materials were scarce. Skilled workers had been drafted or killed. Despite Hitler's orders, only about 425,000 STG-44s were produced before the war ended. For comparison, Germany made over 14 million Kar 98K rifles during the war. Those 425,000 weapons, though, had an outsized impact. Soldiers who received them fought harder to keep them. When a soldier with an STG-44 was killed, other soldiers fought over who would take his weapon. It became a prize, a treasure, something worth risking your life to possess. Why such intense attachment? Partly because the weapon worked so well, but also because of something deeper. The STG-44 represented a fundamental shift in the soldiers' relationship with violence. It gave them a sense of control in situations designed to make them feel helpless. Think about the average soldier's experience of combat. You're following orders. You're reacting to situations. Enemies appear and you respond. You rarely feel like you're in control of anything. Combat is chaos, confusion, terror. But when you held an STG-44 you felt different. You felt capable. Powerful. Like you had agency over your own survival. This psychological shift is crucial to understanding why soldiers loved the weapon. It wasn't just about firepower. It was about feeling empowered in the most disempowering situation imaginable. War strips soldiers of control. The STG-44 gave them a piece of it back. Soviet soldiers noticed the weapon immediately. Their combat reports describe German units with automatic rifles that could pin down entire platoons. When Soviet forces overran German positions, STG-44s were priority targets for capture. Soviet commanders wanted them studied, understood, copied. And copied they were. After the war, Mikhail Kalashnikov designed the AK-47. He had access to captured STG-44s. The similarities are undeniable. Both use intermediate cartridges. Both feature selective fire. Both use similar gas-operated mechanisms. Both are designed for reliability over precision. The AK-47 is essentially a refined, simplified version of the STG-44's core concept. The AK-47 would become the most produced firearm in human history. Over 100 million made. It armed revolutions, insurgencies, and national armies across the globe. And it all traces back to that German weapon designed in desperation on the Eastern Front. What does this tell us about weapon design and warfare? That effectiveness spreads. That good ideas, even dark, violent ideas, get copied and improved. That the STG-44 didn't just influence one war. It shaped the next 80 years of armed conflict. The Americans were watching too, but they drew the wrong lessons initially. After the war, U.S. military doctrine still emphasized long-range marksmanship. They developed the M14 rifle, firing the powerful 7.62 by 51 mm NATO cartridge. It could reach out and touch targets at extreme distances. But it had the same problems the Germans faced in 1942. The recoil was massive. Automatic fire was almost impossible to control. The weapon was heavy. And most importantly, American soldiers in Vietnam were fighting at the same distances German soldiers fought at in Russia, 100 to 300 meters. The M14 was the wrong weapon for the actual war being fought. So the US adopted the M16, firing the 5.56 by 45 mm intermediate cartridge. Suddenly, American soldiers could do what German soldiers did in 1944, deliver sustained, accurate automatic fire at combat distances. The improvement in effectiveness was immediate and dramatic. Today, every modern military rifle is an assault rifle using an intermediate cartridge. The M4, the AK-47, the SCAR, the August, the FAMAS, all of them. Different designs, different countries, but the same core philosophy that the STG-44 pioneered. Create a weapon optimized for real combat, not idealized doctrine. But let's return to that dark reason soldiers loved the STG-44. We've talked about tactical advantages and psychological empowerment. Now let's address the most uncomfortable part of this story. The weapon made killing easier. Not just tactically easier but psychologically easier. And soldiers loved it for that reason, even if they never articulated it that way. Here's a question worth sitting with for a moment. Is it wrong to design weapons that make killing psychologically easier? Military forces would say no. Their job is to win wars and protect soldiers. If a weapon helps soldiers overcome their natural reluctance to kill, that's fulfilling the mission. Soldiers survive because they're more effective. Wars are won because troops fight more aggressively. From this perspective, the STG-44 was a tremendous success. But there's another perspective. making killing easier, more automatic, more psychologically accessible. This changes society. These weapons don't stay on battlefields. They enter civilian markets. They're used in crimes, in mass shootings, in violence that has nothing to do with warfare. The assault rifle category that the STG-44 created now dominates gun violence statistics worldwide. This isn't to blame the STG-44 specifically. It's to recognize that weapon design has consequences that echo far beyond the battlefield. When you create a weapon that effectively reduces psychological barriers to killing, you've changed human behavior in ways that are difficult to control or predict. German soldiers loved the STG-44 for complex, overlapping reasons. It worked better than previous weapons. It increased their chances of survival. It made them feel powerful and in control. But underneath all these reasons was something darker and more primal. It made them more efficient killers, and in the brutal calculus of war, that felt good. This is the part of the story that makes people uncomfortable. We want to believe that soldiers are reluctant killers, that they fight only because they must, that violence is always a last resort. And for many soldiers this is true. But we also have to acknowledge that effective weapons create positive feedback loops. Success in combat releases adrenaline, dopamine, a sense of accomplishment. The weapon that helps you succeed becomes associated with these positive feelings. Soldiers weren't just rationally evaluating the STG-44's tactical advantages. They were emotionally bonding with a tool that made them feel powerful in situations designed to make them feel helpless. That emotional bond is why soldiers fought to keep their weapons. Why they risked punishment to acquire them. Why did they losing them more than other equipment? The legacy of the STG-44 is visible everywhere you look in modern warfare. Every assault rifle in every military arsenal worldwide descends from its design philosophy. The concept it pioneered, intermediate cartridge, selective fire, emphasis on controllability, has become the standard that all infantry weapons must meet. But the legacy goes deeper than hardware. The STG-44 represented a moment when weapon design explicitly prioritized psychological effectiveness alongside tactical effectiveness. It's not enough for a weapon to be mechanically superior. It must feel right in the soldier's hands. It must create confidence. It must reduce hesitation. Modern weapon designers understand this intuitively because the STG-44 taught that lesson so effectively. Walk into any military museum and you'll find an STG-44 on display. It looks primitive now compared to modern weapons. Stamped steel construction. Simple sights. Heavy by today's standards. But pick one up, feel the weight, grip the pistol grip, flip the selector switch, and you're holding a revolution. You're holding the weapon that changed everything. German soldiers loved it because it worked. Because it kept them alive when everything else was trying to kill them. Because it made them feel like warriors instead of victims. But the dark reason underneath all of these reasons was that it made them comfortable with killing in ways previous weapons never did. This isn't a moral judgment on those soldiers. They were fighting for survival in the most brutal conflict in human history. They grabbed onto anything that improved their odds. The STG-44 improved their odds dramatically, so they loved it. Simple as that. But we can acknowledge their reasons while also recognizing what those reasons reveal about weapon design, human psychology, and the nature of violence. The STG-44 was effective because it understood something true and dark about human beings: make killing easier, reduce the psychological weight of violence, create positive associations with lethal effectiveness, and soldiers will embrace the tool that does this. Every modern conflict features assault rifles as the primary infantry weapon. Syria, Ukraine, Afghanistan, Iraq. Everywhere you look, soldiers carry weapons that are direct descendants of the STG-44's revolutionary design. The weapon that German soldiers loved in 1944 has shaped warfare for 80 years and counting. This isn't just historical trivia. It's a reminder that innovation in violence has consequences that last for generations. The STG-44 solved tactical problems faced by German soldiers on the Eastern Front. But in solving those problems, it created a template for infantry weapons that would be copied, refined, and spread across the entire world. The dark reason soldiers loved it: psychological accessibility of violence, reduction of hesitation, empowerment through lethality. These features weren't bugs. They were the core of why the weapon worked so well. And every military force that studied the STG-44 understood this, even if they never said it explicitly. Modern military training reflects lessons learned from the STG-44 era. Soldiers are conditioned to overcome natural reluctance to kill through repetitive training that creates automatic responses. Shoot, don't think. React, don't hesitate. The weapon is just a tool. The enemy is just a target. This conditioning works because weapons like the STG-44 made designers realize that psychological factors matter as much as mechanical ones. So when we look at the STG-44 in a museum, what are we really looking at? We're seeing a moment when weapon design became consciously psychological. When designers stopped just thinking about ballistics and started thinking about how to make soldiers more comfortable with violence. That's the dark innovation at the heart of the assault rifle category. German soldiers loved the STG-44. Soviet soldiers who captured them wanted them. American soldiers who studied them learned from them. And now, soldiers worldwide carry weapons that inherit its DNA. That's a remarkable legacy for a weapon produced in limited numbers during a losing war. The story of the STG-44 is ultimately about innovation born from desperation, but also about the uncomfortable truths regarding why certain weapons resonate with those who carry them. It worked because it was mechanically superior. But it was loved because it made soldiers feel powerful through increased lethality. Those two things are connected, and we can't fully understand the weapon's impact without acknowledging both. Here's my question for you now. What's the best story from World War II that you think deserves more attention? Maybe it's a lesser-known battle, an overlooked innovation, or a human story that got buried by bigger headlines. Drop your answer in the comments. History is full of incredible stories that we've forgotten or never learned in the first place. The STG-44 is one of them, a weapon that changed warfare forever but remains relatively unknown outside military history circles. Every time you see news footage of soldiers carrying assault rifles, you're seeing the STG-44's legacy. Every time there's a debate about assault weapons, you're discussing descendants of this 1944 German design. The weapon's impact on history is immeasurable, even though most people have never heard of it. German soldiers loved it for reasons both obvious and dark. It kept them alive. It made them effective. But it also made them comfortable with violence in new ways. That's the full story, the tactical brilliance, the psychological manipulation, and the legacy that continues to shape warfare today. The STG-44 wasn't just a weapon. It was a revelation about how to design tools for killing, and that revelation has echoed through the decades ever since.